The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
You're listening to the Alldus podcast, ServiceNow series. Our guest today is Tom Sidebottom. Tom is a principal platform architect at ECS. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you. So, Tom, let's start with yourself, please, as we do with all of our guests. Could you talk to us about your background in technology and what your journey has been from where you first got started, some of the roles you've held along the way, and what's led you to where you are today as the principal platform architect at ECS?
I've been in technology for longer than I want to admit, so I'll jump back to the place I was at before I came to ServiceNow. I was working in Oracle, and I led a global development team there. Enjoyed what I was doing, but honestly, I was in a management role, and I didn't like the administrative side of my job. In 2006, that cloud computing thing was really starting to grow legs, starting to take off, and I had no clue what that meant. So I decided to go find out what that was. ServiceNow was kind of in a startup mode, so I decided I would go do that for a while, learn what cloud computing was all about, and then leverage that experience to go get a job at a larger organization. One of the things that I immediately recognized was that ServiceNow was completely different than any technology I'd ever interacted with. And I knew it was going to change the landscape of the way that large enterprises did business. Because the company was so young and it was just in a startup, I had the opportunity to do just about everything. Funny story, my boss came to me one day and he said, "Hey, we need somebody to go out and do training." And I told him, "I'm probably not the guy you want to go do training." And he said, "You're the only guy we've got, so you've got to go do it." I did it. I had a great time. And in that experience, I realized that I'd become passionate evangelist for the platform. So fast forward to 2022, I was the principal platform architect for all next-gen programs and applications. Loved what I was doing, really did. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to get back in front of our customers, and I wanted that face-to-face interaction and that contact where I could share my passion with the platform and kind of guide customers in the way that they were adopting the technology. Unfortunately, because of my seniority, there weren't really any roles open for me to move into. So after 16 years in the ecosystem, I had a very large network of people I knew. So I decided it was time to move. There were only 3 companies that I would even consider moving to, and ECS was one of those at the top of the list. So literally on April Fool's Day of 2022, I joined ECS in their business development team. So that's my background, where I'm at now. I joined the business development team as a principal platform architect. I'm customer facing and love pretty much every day that I get up and go to work.
Thank you so much for that, Tom. We could probably spend the next 20 minutes talking about your journey over the past 17 years, being an early adopter of the platform, but we've got so much to cover with ECS and your role now. So let's jump straight into it. First of all, for those listening who are not familiar with ECS, tell us about the company, who you are, what you do, mission of the business.
So ECS is a very large organization. I work in the federal sector, so my focus is on federal clients. We have a commercial practice as well that focuses on commercial implementations of ServiceNow. So we do both commercial and federal. My sector is federal. Our focus is government agencies, and we do just about everything. One of the things that's really fascinating at the core of ECS, we are a process company. We're not a technology company where we schlep hardware or software. So we focus on processes, we focus on process improvement. And that's one of the things I really like about what ECS does, is that focus gives us the opportunity to almost be software agnostic or solution agnostic. But the thing is, ServiceNow is such an amazing platform that you can really do just about anything with it. I'm of the mind that if you wanted to launch the space shuttle, ServiceNow is probably a good place to look, but that's probably me being a little optimistic in that.
Thank you for that, Tom. So let's jump into your role now. You mentioned that you're customer facing, and you talked in your introduction why ECS was one of the very few companies that you would join. What was it about the company that lured you into them? And then give us some insight into the day-to-day of your position.
You bet. The thing that I liked about ECS was their culture. And like I said, after the time that I'd been in the ServiceNow ecosystem, I had the chance to meet tons and tons and tons of partners. I didn't want to go to an organization that was just what I characterize as gear turners, guys that are pushing out code and doing implementations as quickly as they can. ECS really focuses on the specific needs of the customers, how they fulfill those, and they look at each customer in a very unique way. There are other partners that look at an organization, and there's an assumption that every company uses, and I'm going to use ITSM as an example, everybody does IT service management the same way. And the reality, especially at government agencies, is that couldn't be further from the truth. Every organization's unique. Sure, there are commonalities across the board, but ECS takes the time to really understand what a specific agency is doing and how they're using the platform. So that was one of the things I really liked. Another thing I really liked is the culture of the organization. And when I say culture, it's the way that the people inside the company interact with each other. And you might look at that and say, Tom, you weren't an insider. How would you know that? And the reason I knew that is because I knew so many people in the company, and I heard the way they talked about the organization and the way they worked together with their peers. And it was an organization where we're all in this together. We all rise together. We all fall together. And that's one of the things that really drew me to the company. My role as a principal platform architect in the business development side is interacting with customers to look at the way that they're going to implement the solution. It's common that they have questions where they say, hey, can we do X with the ServiceNow platform? Or we want to do X with ServiceNow, and we've got these 3 other siloed solutions. How can we integrate with those and make it all work together into this seamless architecture? So my role is to really look at that and say, this is the way the ServiceNow platform is going to work for you. This is what you should expect as an outcome. And honestly, there are times where we sit down with a government agency and we say, ServiceNow doesn't do that. So one of the things I love is the ability to just be honest and feel like I don't have to say, ServiceNow does everything. I made the comment a minute ago about launching the space shuttle, but the reality is like multimedia. ServiceNow is not a multimedia solution. It's not a gaming solution, and everybody knows that. But we have customers. We had one just last week that came to us, and they wanted to do multimedia with metadata and being able to tag and search multimedia files. So that's not really our sweet spot. So I felt really good being able to just come back to them and say, there's probably a better solution than that for ServiceNow. The reality is the customer then came back to us and said, can we do the workflow stuff in ServiceNow and then integrate with that other platform? And we said, absolutely, we can absolutely do that. So that's one of the things I really love about what I get to do.
So Tom, knowing what I know about ECS, it has a broad company portfolio that supports different organizations, both in the public sector, government agencies. You work with a lot of different end customers, and each with their own unique set of problems that they want solved or use cases that they're exploring. When you look at the recent projects that you've been involved in, are there any that you're particularly proud of or you were excited about that demonstrates not just ServiceNow's capabilities, but the impact that ECS had for the customer?
There are a few that come to mind right off the bat. One of them that's really fascinating. And consider that the government, to a large degree, moves paper. And when I say moves paper, they literally move paper when they're doing something. So there's a recruiting agency that's working with one of the government agencies that is in charge of recruiting, and they go to high schools to recruit people and talk to people about, hey, do you want to join this particular government agency? And they literally manually write things down and then they shuffle it back into the office, and then they write it down again, and then they transpose it. So the solution that we came up with was based on a mobile device, and the mobile device, they could input that information directly into their mobile device in a disconnected mode. So a lot of times they're in a situation where they're disconnected from the internet. So they would be in disconnected mode. Then they would go back into the office and they would upload all that information back into the system, and then a workflow would trigger, and then they would go through all of the recruiting process, all automatically, workflow driven, digital signatures. There's something called a PIV and a CAC, a common access card, that you have to use. So the signatures were based on a CAC, and it's all auditable, it's all enforceable from an audit standpoint. So if a particular authority digitally signed something, we know that they were the person who actually signed it. So that's one of them that's really fascinating. There was another one that we did that comes to mind. And think of an agency that has hundreds and hundreds of people, and they're all using a single computer. And that might sound really strange, but that's a real use case. And they needed a place where people could request time off or update their schedules. And traditionally, they had gone to that single workstation and requested time off. And I know I even think about that. I hear myself saying it out loud, and I think that can't be true. But that's actually the way they did it. So what we did is, again, we created a mobile solution where people could go in, they could request their PTO, everything, and it all fed up into the major system. And then it was all approved and everything. It was workflow driven. It was really fascinating the way that it worked.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
I want to go back slightly because a lot of what you said ties into the company, its culture and people. So you've been in the ServiceNow ecosystem for quite some time. You've seen different companies, different projects, and you speak passionately about ECS. So I want to help our audience look behind the scenes of the current setup of the ServiceNow workforce at ECS, from the size, the various positions, to the different types of teams and business units. Can you give us a look behind the scenes of the broader ServiceNow team at ECS and what it's like day to day?
On a day-to-day basis, we all pretty much have a keen understanding of the projects that are executing, and that's because we have a great communication conduit inside the company. You'll be amazed to hear that's ServiceNow, where everybody has an understanding of the projects that are executing at any given time. And even though I'm on the business development side of the house, I have a relationship with the guys that are in the field doing the implementations. So I get a lot of opportunities to talk with them, hear what they're doing, understand what difficulties they're running into, what challenges they're seeing, how they overcome them. In fact, a lot of times we get to Q&A together and talk about how do we work around a specific solution, or what's the best solution for that. And one of the things I learned about ServiceNow very early on is there are 3 ways to do everything. And the reality is today in ServiceNow, there's more than 3. There's probably 5 or 8 different ways you could do something. So when I sit down with solution architects, a lot of times we'll talk about the different ways we can accomplish something, and we'll come up with the best idea. Day to day, we're a project-driven company. We look for our customer satisfaction, obviously. And those are the things that really drive us. We work very closely with our customers. We work closely with the stakeholders within these government agencies. So we're looking to them to see what it is that they want to accomplish, not just in the immediate implementation, but what's their vision for the future. And that's where I come back in. When they have a vision for the future, the next thing they're going to do with ServiceNow, that's where I get the opportunity to sit down with them and kind of architect that future, create a roadmap, if you will, for what's the next cool thing that we're going to do with the ServiceNow platform.
Let's talk about that, because that is a great segue into where I wanted to go next, which is what's next within ServiceNow for ECS. And you're probably the perfect person to ask that question, given your track record within ServiceNow, your position within ECS. So when you look at the immediate roadmap, particularly the next 1 to 2 years, what excites you? What are you guys hoping to accomplish? What continued growth and investment can we expect to see from ECS?
From ECS, we're constantly growing. We're in growth mode. Every single meeting I sit in, we're talking about resources that we need to bring in. And it's not just developers. It's not just solution consultants. It's across the gamut of projects. So you've got engagement managers, which are likened to a project manager. You've got process control consultants. You've got BPAs. You've got testers, people that are just going to test the outcome of what the developers developed. So it's not limited. And I know for me, I used to think that it was all about writing code. But the reality is, if you've got a knowledge of ServiceNow, you've got a passion for ServiceNow, and you're excited about getting things done, it's likely that there's an opportunity for you here at ECS, because every day I hear about opportunities across the spectrum. So I'd love to tell you we need developers, or we need people who know JavaScript, or we need people who know or have a PMP background or something like that. But the reality is it's across the spectrum.
Two follow-up questions to that, because I think your transition from previous technology into ServiceNow, when you made the call, was quite early in ServiceNow's journey, has obviously proven to be a very wise decision. But there's still so much more to come and so much more opportunity. So speaking to an audience of tech professionals, what would you tell them about why ServiceNow is something they should look at and consider for a career development, maybe a pivot? You obviously have done it and done it very successfully, but there's still a lot more to do. So if you were speaking to an engineer or a data scientist, what would you tell them about why ServiceNow is a place they should consider?
I would probably go all the way back to the beginning. And when you look at when Fred Luddy started the company, his goal was to do IT service management and do it very well, and do it differently than anybody had done IT SM before. And I had the opportunity to meet Fred, talk to Fred. And one of the things that was frustrating for him is that people did not like to work with the IT organization, because they were a bunch of gearheads. They didn't speak the same language. They didn't understand what the problem was. And if you look at the transition from just doing IT service management to where we are today, that evolution, that's an amazing evolution, and it's amazing change. And one of the things I want to say is, if you look at digital transformation as an example, and digital transformation is a cool word, but if you look at the way that digital transformation completely changed the landscape for the way that people are doing business, the way that companies are executing, that kind of a leap is the same leap we're going to see with AI. So imagine if I could go into my ServiceNow portal and I was saying, I'm thinking of taking 3 days off next week. Do I have enough vacation time to do that? And using AI, it gave me a detailed response to, yes, you've got 3 days of vacation time. I don't need to bother somebody else. I don't need to call somebody in HR and say, hey, can you look at my balance for my PTO? We can use AI to answer those questions. But you look at that and extrapolate that to the possibilities within your typical environment. If I could go into the portal and say, the heat is really high in my office, and AI knew that I was in building 3 on campus X, wherever that happened to be, and I was on the 4th floor, and it knew we had an outage with the air conditioning, it could immediately respond and say, Tom, we've got an outage in the air conditioning. We expect that to be finished in the next 2 hours. So imagine that we didn't have to distract somebody from doing their real job to answer a phone call from me to say, hey guys, my office is really hot. And they would go, oh yeah, we've got an outage that's going to be fixed. So AI is going to completely change the landscape of the way that ServiceNow does business, the way companies do business. And right now, we're not in its infancy. I think it's really starting to grow legs the same way that cloud was when I left Oracle. So if there was a good time to get into ServiceNow, I would say you couldn't pick a better time, because we're going to once again completely and totally change the landscape of the way people do business.
Let's bring that back to ECS. So obviously anyone in the ServiceNow community knows that there's an incredible opportunity over these next few years to benefit from the introduction of AI capabilities, and ServiceNow is the platform to build AI on. As we look at the opportunity that exists within ECS, there's incredible growth. Given a lot of your customer base is in the public sector, where there's always been this stigma that the technology investment, it might be lagging behind a few years from private sector. ServiceNow is helping these public sector organizations accelerate, play catch up, and in some cases get even ahead of the game. ECS are one of the key players in this field. So when you look at the near-term roadmap, which I know you're very much clued into, speaking to an audience of potential future employees, what is it that you would tell somebody about ECS, its mission, its culture, and its environment that would attract top ServiceNow professionals to come and work with ECS over some of the other organizations also trying to hire top talent in this field?
One of the things that I would say is that most government agencies are right now starting to embrace technology in a new way. And I'll talk about one of our clients. They hadn't done an upgrade for 40 years. And it blew my mind that they hadn't upgraded their software stack for 40 years, and everything they had done had been completely siloed. Considering that government agencies are right now starting to embrace evolving technology, and I'll use AI as an example, government agencies are really slow to take up things that they don't understand or that's a little bit intimidating. And I would say AI falls into that category. But as we see government agencies become more and more comfortable with that, we're going to see that uptake expand the amount of work that we do and expand the opportunities that are out there. For somebody who's interested in coming to ECS, we are one of the key players with our federal clients. And so there would be opportunities to work with just about every government agency out there. In fact, I'm trying to think of a government agency that we don't work with because we work with all of them. There's so many opportunities, especially as the government starts to embrace technology in a new way. One of the things I said earlier, the way people had actually paper walked or walked paper from office to office, that's not that long ago. That's 6 months ago they were doing that. And in a lot of offices, they're still doing it. That's how slow the uptake is for government agencies. And so right now, there are so many opportunities to work with clients and change the way they do business in an exciting way. And so that's one of the things, at least for me, that I look forward to pretty much on a daily basis when I come into the office and say, who do I get to talk to today? What's going to surprise me? And find out where they're doing something where I look at it and go, I can't believe you're doing that.
So Tom, you've obviously, when you entered the ServiceNow technology space, it was very different to what it is now. But you're seeing new people come in all the time. And I know from the training you've done, you have a good way of advising and coaching others. For people getting into ServiceNow today, what advice would you offer them? What guidance would you share with them on how to be successful, how to make the transition, what they need to be aware of, and words of encouragement for them to ensure them that they're doing the right thing?
One of the things that I would say is I would encourage you to find somebody who is a mentor. And it might sound strange that somebody has as much experience as I do, that I have a mentor, but I do. There are 2 or 3 people here at ECS that if I'm looking at a difficult problem, I always go to them and say, what do you guys think? How would you solve this problem? The first thing I would encourage you to do is find somebody, I characterize it as a trusted advisor, somebody you trust, you feel comfortable with, that can help mentor you, can help grow your career. While we're talking about growing your career, join a company like ECS that's interested in growing your career. And that's one of the things we really pride ourselves here, is that we have this culture where we realize there are lots of opportunities, and that opportunity is not just for the employee, but that opportunity is also for ECS, because the more you learn, the more you can do for ECS. So join a company like that. Ask if you're unsure. And this is one of the things that's really hard. And I'll be honest with you, it's hard for me as well. If I don't know, and this happened to me last week, by the way, I thought I knew something, but I'd heard something completely different than what I thought. And so I went to that trusted mentor of mine and I said, hey, is this the way I think it is? And we had a great conversation about it. One of the things that will do you in is if you don't ask. And I can tell you one of the things that's frustrating for an engagement manager or somebody who's on a project is if somebody spends hours and hours doing something that they could have reached out to somebody next to them and said, hey, I'm not sure how this business rule works, or I'm not sure how this JavaScript works. But ask the person. We're here, everybody's here to work together. We're all here to succeed together. When we succeed as a team, the company succeeds. The last thing I would say, culture for me is so important. I like to work at a company where I feel like I'm working with a bunch of friends. I feel like I'm working with my family. And that's one of the things that's important for me. And that's one of the things I love about ECS. We have that type of culture here where I come into the office, I joke around with my peers, we have a lot of fun. And when work is fun, life is fun.
Tom, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us. I was very excited about this one in particular, just given the sheer number of years that you've been in the ServiceNow community and how you've seen it evolve. But some of the many takeaways I have from this conversation is you still have the passion for the technology, for the field, its capabilities, and the environment that you're in at ECS sounds like you couldn't be at a better place. So incredibly exciting. And we wish you, the team, and everyone at ECS the very best of luck in the months and years to come, and look forward to having you back on the show again in the near future.
I'll look forward to it as well. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.